Good afternoon, and welcome back, everyone. My name is Jose Angulo, and I'm the Global Technical Manager PRRS at Boehringer Ingelheim. We're going to start with the afternoon session, and today we're going to jump from the pure science that we reviewed in the morning to more practical knowledge and information. And I have the honor to be your chairman for the next two presentations. Our first speaker for this afternoon is Dr. Tim Loula. He is a graduate from Minnesota University. He practiced in St. Peter, Minnesota. He received the award of Practitioner of the Year by the American Association of Swine Veterinarians, and also he got the award on Practicing Science for Lehman Conference. He is a very well-known and respected practitioner in North America and all around the world. And with that, I will present Team Dr. Loula.
Thank you, Jose. Thanks for the invite to China here. So this would be called the non-scientific portion of the program, right? Dr. Gillespie, you and I are the non-scientific portion of the program. So I'm from the Swine Vet Center, and we have 11 veterinarians, and we're an independent vet practice that only works on pigs around the world. And some of you may recognize Dr. Reichs, Dr. Fetter, our world renowned on PRRS and bore studs, filtration projects. We have 150,000 sows that are under filtration. Dr. Yeski here is one of the world's leaders in eradication programs, PRRS, pseudorabies, mycoplasma. Very, very good group of veterinarians in the Swine Vet Center. So, for PRRS, what are we doing for PRRS? So we've been involved in 7 area elimination control programs throughout the United States. I'm going to talk just on one of those programs, and it's a control program, not an elimination program. And so we have 2 control programs going. So control is the big word here. And we have one that's been going 2 years here in southeast Iowa, and one that just started within the last 6 months up in northwest Iowa. The red is pig-dense areas, so very pig-dense area, much like many areas of China. And so we're not going to eliminate or eradicate PRRS. We're going to try to control PRRS. We're involved in programs in northern Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, where we do eliminate PRRS. But this is a program that I'm going to talk about that is a control program in a pig-dense area. Our goal is to vaccinate every pig in these regions. And so that would be vaccinating sows, wean pigs, or nursery pigs, and finisher pigs, to have every pig protected with vaccine in this area. That's the goal of these control programs. So how do we get started? We'll say phase 1, or the feasibility part of the program. And so you have to look at an area and say, is it an elimination area or is it a control area? So we're going to talk about just the control area. We also have experience in elimination. So we're in a very pig-dense area. We're going to look at control. You have to organize the program. You have to have producers that want to control PRRS. PRRS is devastating worldwide, and so producer, veterinarian, the BI team has helped us, and we have a project coordinator. So we have the feasibility, what is it going to be, elimination or control, and then if you determine, then you start to put the organization together. Phase 2, you have to identify all the pig sites in the area. And so in this Southeast Iowa program, that's a county, Washington County. And so we looked at it and said, here's Washington County, and said it's going to be a Washington County, but actually the pigs were kind of in a little bit different area. So this is the defined area, and this is the area that we're going to try to identify every pig farm and eventually vaccinate every pig farm in that area. And so in reality, it ends up looking a little bit more like this as our defined area. And we will take other producers into the program. Here's the big Mississippi River here, and so we are taking producers into the program, but you don't want to have too big of an area, and this is very pig dense. So we're 2 years into this program, and we have 40 producers, small and large. They have 400 pig sites in this small area. And so the majority of the pigs are multi-site. And so we have off-site nurseries, off-site finishers. I don't think we have a farrow to finish farm. So 400 sites, about 1 million pigs on feed in this area, all in less than 2 years. So we've had support from BI to help us do sequencing and help us do mapping. The local veterinarians and consultant veterinarians like myself have done the work down at the farm, but we have had help from BI on the mapping, which is very important. So phase 3 is you have to characterize the region. What is going on in the region? And so you have to do diagnostics, figure out where the farms are, and figure out are they positive, negative, stable, etc. So you have to monitor the sites, figure out what's going on. Dr. Oversight gave a tremendous talk this morning. So rope testing has really facilitated these programs. The producers can do the rope testing. The rope testing in our hands at the Swine Vet Center is actually better than blood testing in most cases. And so we routinely do PRRS, SIV or influenza, Circo, mycoplasma. It's been great technology. And so this has allowed us to do these regional programs because we don't have to blood test every pig. We can hang a rope and figure out what's going on. So Dr. Oversight, great work that you've done. Swiffer testing, the mops, we also use those for hallways, chutes, truck beds, etc. So that's been another technology based off the rope testing. And we know through lots of research, Dr. D, Dr. Yeski, my partner, aerosol transmission is one of the keys the way PRRS gets around. And you're going to be seeing more research on aerosol transmission of PRRS. Still, we feel the #1 way PRRS moves around. So how do we characterize these farms? And so you have to find every pig site. The triangles are sow farms. The squares are nurseries. The circles are finishers. And then they're different colors. And so they're positive unstable, positive vaccinated, negative vaccinated. And so this is how we do the map. So we characterize the region. We combine and tabulate the data every 2 weeks. And so we have, God, I have trouble finding them. We have unknown, we have number of positives, we have positive vaccinated, and so this is data that's tabulated every 2 weeks and sent out or up on a website for the producers to look at. What are the goals of the project? Well, I said up front, it's not an eradication program, it's not an elimination program, it's a control program. And so, one goal, increase awareness of PRRS and associated costs. In the U.S., it's $690 million. $1.8 million a day is the cost of PRRS. And so we want to make every producer in this area aware of the costs. Also, an enhanced awareness of PRRS. And so the biosecurity discussions we have at our quarterly meetings talk about PRRS spread on truck washes, manure handling, pig movements. We want to improve communication, so I know what my neighbor is doing, he knows what, if I'm having a PRRS outbreak, etc. So improve communication. Reduce the incidence of PRRS. So we want to find, and we're hopeful that by having every pig vaccinated in that area, sows, nurseries, finishers, that we will reduce the incidence of PRRS over time. We also want to reduce the severity of PRRS. We know we will still get some PRRS, but we don't want those major terrible outbreaks that we've had, just like you guys, the speakers talked this morning on the high-path strains. We want to have fewer introductions of new highly pathogenic strains. So if everybody is vaccinated, does that help wild strains from coming in? That's a goal. We want to decrease the length of time that PRRS sheds. So BI in the United States did a study of vaccinated versus unvaccinated, and if they were unvaccinated, the pigs shed virus for 70 days. If they're vaccinated, they only shed for 45 days. And so that puts the area, the control area, at less risk because they're not shedding virus as long. Every meeting we have, we talk about how every site can improve their biosecurity. And so at the farm level and the area level. And so trying to get that little biosecure bubble around every pig farm. What is the biosecurity? Well, we have people downtime so you don't go from a PRRS site to a negative site. All the sow farms have showers. All the nurseries have showers. And so we put a bench in front of it. You can see the bench. You sit on the bench, put your shoes off, spin around, and go into the shower. Very common on almost all sow farms and nurseries. So there is the very defined dirty and clean side. So nothing gets into the pig farm. All supplies are quarantined and fumigated, so we don't drag anything in with supplies. So you can see that they're spraying, they're fumigating them, they're quarantining supplies into the farm. The dead boxes, we don't want any trucks coming and picking up dead pigs because they're not very clean. And so we've gone from dead huts like this where a truck would come and pick up deads to composting. So almost all sow farms and nurseries are now composting. This is a full covered compost. Pigs are composted in there. Here's a covered one, but still open. And so you work the bays, producers, it's very common in our practice and works very well. So we never allow we call them rendering trucks or a dead truck to come onto our facilities. We get rid of our deads right on site. We had a summer intern program this last summer, and we looked at internal biosecurity. And so we wanted to see if we were dragging PRRS around inside the farm. So this was a 6,000 sow farm that had broken with PRRS, and we're looking at the hallways, bottom of your shoes, your hands. And so this 6,000 sow farm broke here. They were inoculated with PRRS, and then we started blood testing, started swabbing all the different fomites. So we looked at needles, gloves, boots, nippers, split suckle boxes, and here's the results. And so the side cutters are what you use for castration. 14% of the time they were carrying PRRS. Hands, 6% of the time they were carrying PRRS. Boots, 6%. Needles, and we talk needles a lot, but in our previous studies, we haven't found needles to be that big in dragging stuff around. The split suckle boxes with the large litters, you put them in there so the other ones can get colostrum, 17% of the time. The hallways, 100% of the time we had PRRS in the hallways. And so it says internal biosecurity, sanitation within a farrowing complex is very important. And so you will spread PRRS from litter to litter by your hands, by your boots, walking around in the hallways if you don't keep your hallways clean. So very good study that one of our interns gave on internal biosecurity. We want to know more about the area, so study PRRS movement. And so if we have a PRRS break up in here, can we protect it from coming here and infecting all these negative farms? And so we want to study that, and with better communication, can we not do this? We found in our projects that that's exactly what happens. I'm weaning pigs over to another site, but I know that area's status, and so I change where I'm going to flow pigs. And so it's been a help and success in not infecting other farms. Some of these get incredibly busy when you study all the movements. This was the movements in one of the projects. When we have multi-site, we have a lot of pigs movement. And so it's good to know where, but when you put it all together, it's sometimes a little bit scary. Another project goal, improve production. So you heard this morning how devastating PRRS was in China. We had similar events. This was circovirus and 184. This was atypical strain here. This is production on nursery or on finishing for a large production system. And so by having vaccine, we're trying to take out those high spikes of death loss and have more consistent production. What other facts? It's a producer-driven program, so we need local support from the producers and the local veterinarians. BI isn't going to get it done. Outside consultants aren't going to get it done. It has to be bought into by the producers. They have PRRS, and they want help in controlling PRRS. So they have to take ownership of the program. They need to be updated. They need regular reminders. And so every 2 weeks, our producers get an email, regular feedback on what the status is in their control area. So if status changes on one of your farms, you have an outbreak, or we have an off-site nursery or finisher that empties and we refill it with negative pigs, we get a status of what's happened the last 2 weeks. And so if you look at this, these were previously positive sites. They sold their pigs to market. They were finishing pigs, sold their pigs to market, and refilled with negative pigs. So that status changed. And so what happened in the last 2 weeks, this is the sheet they get. Normally on 400 sites, there's about 15 to 20 status changes per 2-week period. These were positive vaccinated, negative vaccinated, and then they turned positive because they tested them. Here's some positive vaccinated, here's some negative vaccinated. They got enrolled in the program this period of time. And so here's some negative sites that they vaccinated those, and so now they're vaccinated. So every 2 weeks, we get this emailed to us and our producers and says, status change. So everybody has to cooperate and are willing to know what your neighbor is doing, because it is an area problem. So PRRS is going to go aerosol in an area, and so you have to be confident that you're going to share data with all your neighbors. This gets updated every 2 weeks, and so you have unknowns, you have positives, you have positive vaccinated, and the producers will go, we have PRRS everywhere. Last year was a very bad year. We have PRRS everywhere. And you go, no, you know what? You only had PRRS on 56% of your sites. And they go, really? And so it's been good to have factual information. And you don't assume everybody has it. You don't assume they're negative. You know. So very good information. Every project, whether it's an elimination or control project, needs a very good coordinator. And so the programs in the U.S. that have been successful, that are moving forward, has an excellent director or coordinator. Coordinator can be, this particular one is an office lady that works at one of the large farms in the area. And so she's an aggressive coordinator. She makes sure everybody gets their data in every 2 weeks. So even if you have no status change, you have to send something in that says we're no change, same status as we were 2 weeks ago. And so that's a very important thing, and it should be someone within the area. It won't be someone, a consultant, or won't be a BI person usually. It'll be an internal, local person that's a coordinator. We've put a job description, and so in your book, there's a job description for what type of person you would need for a coordinator. They're very organized, they're very good about details, they have very good communication skills, and so it's a resume of what you'd want. What's the motivation to do this? PRRS is bad. PRRS costs a lot of money. Everybody knows that. We heard the story in China this morning. We've had the same. And so the motivation is enough that everybody wants PRRS solutions. They know a lot about the virus, as you heard this morning. We want solutions. And so we're learning. If you can understand this a little bit, like Dr. Gillespie, the next speaker, and myself, when we were eradicating pseudorabies, Odjeski's disease, we had to learn. We had to do this similar program. Just the normal vaccination program didn't work. We had to vaccinate more. And we ended up with 4 vaccines to sows, 3 to piglets. And so this is a learning program to see if we can control PRRS long term. So the solution, the motivation is there. Producers have been paying. And so they've been paying for all the testing. The rope testing has been much cheaper than having veterinarians come out and do all the bleeding, so that's helped a lot. And BI has been providing sequencing and mapping. But the producers are all paying for their vet service and the rope testing. It takes a little bit to get everybody involved. And so producers, vets, everybody has to recruit. If there's a group of producers that are not signed up yet, you have to go talk to them. We put ads or articles in the newspapers. We spoke at local pork producer meetings to let everybody aware of what the program was so we would have high participation. So everybody has to help recruit. We're going to benchmark. It's very easy to benchmark an eradication or elimination program because you started with this many positive and now you have this many negative. This is a much harder program to benchmark. And so we're going to do it within the project and say 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, are we better off that we're all vaccinating? We're assuming that, and we hope that's going to happen. And then as there gets more projects, like we're starting the second control project, if you people do one in China, we'll be able to benchmark and talk about all these regional projects that are going, control projects that are going on around the world. Then we'll be able to benchmark those. So it's a control program. I can't emphasize that enough. And so it is the same wants and needs. So a lot of the stuff that we've learned on the eradication programs, we're doing the same thing on a control program. So it's just where you are in the pig world. Most of the successful programs have had a local producer or a local veterinarian that's the champion. I don't know how you say that in Chinese. He's the promoter. He's the role model. He's the leader. He's a local producer, occasionally a local veterinarian that really helps get the project going, keeps it to the forefront so it happens. And so we want to make sure there's a champion, we would call it. In Southeast Iowa, this happens to be a producer that really wants the area to do a better job of controlling PRRS. So phase 4, we have to design PRRS control strategies. So what are we going to do? We have to first, like we talked about, define the areas. And so you have to pick an area. And what are there geographic boundaries? Are there political boundaries? Are there rivers? What defines the area? And so the local producers and vets play a big role there. We have to get the initial testing and diagnostics to see what the status of the area is. The veterinarians are big on postmortems and also getting consent forms. So we have consent forms that say we agree that we're going to participate in this program, and we agree that we're not going to that we're going to share all the data, and there's no lawsuits or blaming that you gave me PRRS. We're all participating, and so we do sign a consent form. We have flow or action charts, and so for the local veterinarians and stuff, what do they do? What does a producer do? If you're negative, you do this. If you're positive, how often do you test? And so you work that out for your area. Your producer, your local veterinarian will work out this flow chart. And we have these for breeding, nursery, finishing to determine and help the local practitioner. We need a very, very high percentage buy-in or participation. And so if your area, you pick an area and only 50% of the producers in the area are going to participate, it's probably going to fail. And so we keep talking about we need close to 100% participation because we're trying to control a whole area by vaccinating. And so we need a very high percentage buy-in. And so that's why I said previously that we're going to have to talk, convince, peer pressure to get everybody involved. The last phase, execution and monitoring. So we need that oversight. The programs have always moved forward faster when they start getting data back. In a control program, the numbers don't really mean much for almost a year because you're still enrolling new farms. So last week you enroll a farm that has 5 farms and they're all positive. It looks like you had a major outbreak of PRRS. And so it takes a while till you get all the farms labeled and what they are, they're all participating, and then it's kind of a steady state. Then the numbers start meaning something. And so our oversight person, we got to make sure we get all the testing done, we got to make sure all the data gets in, we make sure that it gets to the mapping people, to the sequencing people, and so that oversight and management is very important to have these successful, and the producer needs to see something. Some of the projects that have failed in the US have been just because of slow data. It's 3 or 4 month old data. This particular program is actually thinking they need data every week. And so quite a bit of work on that oversight or management person. There is a website that the producers can go and look up, you know, what is the status of that farm? I forgot. And so they can look up and look at a map anytime they want. And so that's an important information. And so they need a website. We have a status change form. We talked about communication. The producer has an outbreak or he has coughing pigs. He has to tell his veterinarian. They have to organize a testing program. The veterinarian then gets a positive PRRS back. He tells the project coordinator. The project coordinator makes sure that it gets sequenced. They tell BI that the mapping portion, that site has changed from a negative to a positive. So you have all these change in status communication that has to go on every day. So it goes producer, veterinarian, project coordinator, they update the database, and they update the maps and the dendrogram. Happens every day. It ends up being about 1 day a week this person spends on her time, but it may be 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, an hour here. So it can happen every day. There's a status change form, and so we can fax it, we can email it, or many times the producer just calls this person and says, this site changed status, it had a PRRS break. So on this form, it says what has happened. And so, like I said before, the site filled with different PRRS status pigs. It was all outed. Or it's having evidence of infection in the herd. It looks like we're breaking with PRRS. Or this was a negative site and I vaccinated for PRRS. These are things that change status of the herd. And so this is what the communication is. It gets to the coordinator and they put it on all the appropriate maps. Every other week, this is what they get. They get the summary table, they get the change in status, they get the site identification, and they get an upgraded map. The mapping has been complicated to get that all right. It changes, so BI has helped us a lot in the United States, these two individuals, in getting the mapping done. There was still one person in the area that we had trouble. They didn't want to join the project, and so we put a lot of pressure to join them, but you can't have a major player that doesn't want to participate. I'll tell you that when you start a program, especially a control program, you will have some non-believers. It's a long-term study, so you won't see results for a couple years. There's no quick wins. You have no previous quantifiable history. And so you're not going to say, well, it looks like we're really less PRRS this year than we did 5 years ago. There's producers that think PRRS is everywhere, so this will never work. They think PRRS will win. They think the vaccine isn't good enough, or they think it's too expensive and too much labor. So you're going to have these naysayers, but if you understand the cost of PRRS, you'll get over the hump on all these, because PRRS is very expensive, and so we have to do something to try to do a better job. The measurements, I'm going to talk to you about how we're going to measure this. Well, obviously it's unclear because we're comparing to what? And so it's not positive or negative, it's comparing. So what we've elected to do is we're going to measure the number of breaks. So we have 400 sites. How many break this year? We're going to do it by type. How many sow farms broke? How many nurseries broke? What about location? Is it all in this area versus this area? And so we're going to compare year to year and hopefully with other projects. So if we get projects in China, if we get them in Iowa and North Carolina, we will have better ways to measure. What we're doing the last year for graphs, outbreaks per year, positive breeding herds, negative vaccinated breeding herds, negative nurseries, negative vaccinated nurseries. These are the things we're presently graphing. And so they're starting to mean something now because we're about a year into doing graphs. And so normally in the United States, we have very little PRRS in the summer. We have more in the winter. So as we got into December last year, we had some sow farms break. So that's a breeding herd. We had 6 of them break in this 2-week period in December. Very common in the United States. You'll see more data. We're tracking more farms seasonally. So all of a sudden, the producers like seeing some of this. Every 2 weeks, they're getting new updated charts like this. And so we also had a finishing barn break. And you know what? If we have 6 sow herds break, a couple weeks later, we start having positive nurseries because they're going out to nurseries. And so producers are starting to like seeing these graphs and understand what's going on in their particular areas. Positive breeding herds, you can see that last winter, the number of breeding herds, % positive went up. We got into August time frame, and there's only 7% that are positive now. And so we try to get wild virus out of these sow farms. We vaccinate. And so that's the type of graphs that we're starting to look at, and we'll see, and I think will be very informative when we have 3 years, 5 years, et cetera in. So the measurements, severity compared to what? And so it's going to take a while before we have something we can really grasp. Is it going to help that we're all vaccinated? Does it reduce shedding? That's the data says that. Is it going to work in a whole area? Do we have less shedding, less spread, less PRRS breaks? That's what we're hoping. We're going to track all the different viruses. If we get a high-pass strain, if we get a different strain, as Dr. Murtaugh talked, we're going to be able to track where it goes because we're sequencing these positives. We're building dendrograms for these areas, so we'll know which viruses have been there, where they show up. Do they show up again next winter? Do they show up in a different area? And be able to track where they've been. We'll do the taking the sequences and putting it on and looking at how it spreads within an area. So we're going to learn a lot. In this Southeast Iowa project, the biggest sow farm elected last fall, a year ago, to filter their farm. And so in the U.S., filtration has been very common in boar studs for 6 or 7 years and highly successful. 3 or 4 years, probably 4 or 5 years now, the first sow farm started getting filtered. And so this will help this area that we will produce lots of negative pigs. It's an 8,000 or 7,500 sow farm. And so we'll have more sites that we're going to get negative pigs. When we filter a sow farm, we do what Dr. Murtaugh talked about this morning. We close the farm and get rid of wild virus. This is a very pig-dense area, and so a small percentage of the filtered barns still break. So we're still vaccinating this farm with BI-modified live vaccine because an outbreak on a naive farm has been calculated to cost like $270 a sow. An outbreak on a vaccinated sow farm is like $90-some. So like 1/5 the cost of a break. And so this producer shut the farm down, filtered it, but still keeps it vaccinated, and we got the wild virus out of that farm. So that's going to help this area. A large farm is producing negative pigs. One producer gets weaned pigs from Illinois, the next state over, and there's some filtration going on in those sow farms. So we hope that's going to help the project in getting more negative pigs on our multi-site systems. So we look at the key to success, to kind of summarize this program, is we have to have good producers, we have to have local leadership, producer, veterinarian, we need good communication from the leadership, we need to get buy-in from almost all producers, hopefully all producers, and we get good support and mapping from the BI team. And we all have to coordinate and work together and look at that in a long-term basis. So in summary, the Southeast Iowa project is off to a very good start with an excellent coordinator. The Northwest Iowa project is just starting. We're about 6 months into it. We have a very new coordinator, and she seems to be very, very good as well. And so we're trying to keep the momentum up because it's going into the PRRS season again, so we will have some PRRS breaks, undoubtedly. But we want to make sure that we keep the momentum, keep everybody vaccinated, so we can look at and look back at this and say it was a successful program as we get down the road multiple years. And so momentum has accelerated when we started getting data back. So in the Northwest project, they're just accumulating data. There's nothing to get back. It doesn't mean anything. It takes a year, year and a half before we get important data that you can look at and say, boy, it looks like something's happening. It looks like we're doing something. So you have to keep the momentum up. I've been happy that the local producers, local veterinarians have taken ownership. That's what it takes to have a successful program. They understand, because we talk about it all the time, that it's a long-term program. And so you're trying to minimize the effects of PRRS. You're trying to have realistic goals. You're not eradicating. You're in a PRRS dense area. It's impossible to eradicate in a PRRS dense or a pig dense area. And so this is a controlled program. And so that's an example of what we're doing in the first controlled programs in the United States. And
to control PRRS. And I'm pretty sure that should be 1 or 2 questions, so we have time for some questions. Okay, there's one question there.
Wonderful presentation, Tim. Thank you. My question is, in my understanding, you said that the stable and negative herds were vaccinated with Ingovac plus MLV. Is this true? Tim said in his presentation, the stable positive pig herds or negative pig herds can be vaccinated with Ingovac plus vaccine. Is right?
Yes. We're vaccinating, we're trying to vaccinate all the herds.
Okay.
I got one idea.
Yes, we're trying to get every pig farm vaccinated, and so vaccine, and even if they break, we still will go in there and booster the sow farm. If they're a positive sow farm, we do the piglets at 10 to 15 days of age, and we're also taking negative farms and vaccinating those because they're in a pig dense area. So yes, we're trying to get everybody vaccinated, and on a positive farm, that data shows that if they're vaccinated, they shed for less period of time. So 70 versus 45 days, they'll shed 25 less days. And so, yes, we are vaccinating. I think that's the question.
Do you vaccinate the both herds?
Positive or negative?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, Tim, A question in that direction. Now that you use the vaccine in a whole herd and mass vaccination in all the pigs, what will be your expectations on the vaccine in an ARC perspective? So, what are you expecting?
Okay, so I think we're making it very clear with the producers that it will not be, they will have no PRRS. That won't happen. We know that the PRRS can infect the fawn if they're vaccinated, but we're trying to have less severity. We're trying to have, if everybody's vaccinated, will they have less outbreaks? Will they be less severe? Will they be less frequently? And will have less losses and less sick pigs? And so it's not vaccinate and you'll never have PRRS. It's vaccinate and maybe you'll have less PRRS, less frequently, less severe.
Any other question for Dr. Loula? If not, let's give a hand to Dr. Loula.